So we will be recording this session. So my name is Bradley Martzagala. I'm a climate reality leader, and tonight I'm filling in for Program Manager of Climate Reality Europe, Jessica Besch, who is our amazing organizer who put together this exciting event for us tonight. In terms of housekeeping, please write your questions and comments in the chat for our Q&A session after our 4 presentations, which will be facilitated by our climate reality leader, Paolo Villavicencio. And before introducing our brilliant speakers, I'd like to give a short introduction to climate reality in today's topic. So for those of you who don't know us, our organization was founded and is chaired by former US Vice President Al Gore with the goal of catalyzing a global solution to the climate crisis. We currently have over 50,000 trained so-called climate reality leaders across the globe, sharing a vision of swift, systemic, and just transition towards net zero emissions by the middle of the century. We work towards a climate neutral future based on the principles of public participation, solidarity, and justice. The European branch of the Climate Reality Project seeks to engage with European communities, empowering them to articulate greater climate ambitions and enabling citizens to co-create responses to the climate crisis, thus generating a bottom-up support for implementation of the 2015 Paris Agreement. Today, we actually get to cover 3 of our 4 global campaign topics, namely reducing emissions, financing a just transition, and strengthening international cooperation on climate using a feminist lens. Before we really get underway, I would like to define what we mean with the term feminist. We're talking about intersectional feminism from a decolonial perspective, so taking into account the many overlapping forms of discrimination of women and people identifying as women, but also other marginalized groups such as people with disability, youth, migrants, as well as those who've been historically oppressed and exploited. In our fight, we are centering justice, care, and solidarity. Ecofeminism also plays a critical role in that it sees climate change, gender equality, and social injustice more broadly as intrinsically related issues, all tied to masculine dominance in society. Specifically, ecofeminism holds that the most environmental issues can be traced back to the global prioritization of qualities deemed masculine. So why is this intersectional feminist approach important in our fight against the climate crisis and in our fight against the fossil fuel industry? So we all know that vulnerable groups are particularly feeling the effects of climate change, with women being one of the groups most affected and least likely to have the resources to cope with climate impacts. In vulnerable communities, women are also burdened with care work and therefore also need to find solutions to climate impacts. So although women play such an integral role in society and are particularly exposed to the climate crisis, they're still often excluded from processes. Environmental and other national policies and agreements made progress focusing more and more on the role of gender at all levels, but large disparities still remain, especially when it comes to intersectional inequities. In the current capitalist and patriarchal system, where women and other frontline communities are both disenfranchised, socioeconomically, as well as disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, this gender-blind approach to the climate crisis is insufficient to adequately address the crisis in a meaningful way, leaving no one behind. So we know we need to start harnessing the knowledge of women, Indigenous peoples, and other frontline communities and recognize their immense ability to transform our societies. In the end, we want to see a systemic transformation of our economic, political, and social system beyond climate neutrality and GDP growth and move more towards the values of inclusion, care, and well-being for people on the planet. I'm happy to be here tonight joined by 4 amazing speakers who will cover the topics of women in high-level climate negotiation spaces, a feminist just transition, and European Green Deal, as well as centering frontline communities when working on climate finance and creating solidarity between women from the global south and the global north. So without further ado, our first speaker is Moana Hasumi Singado. She is an African feminist passionate about fighting structural and intersecting inequities while contributing to a more just, equal, fairer, and sustainable world. Over the last 15 years, she has worked with women's rights organizations, civil societies, and governments in developing strategies, building partnerships, managing programs, and engaging communities towards the promotion and protection of women's rights and the health of the planet. She serves currently as Senior Global Policy Lead at the Women's Environment and Development Organization. She will give us an insight tonight into the status quo of gender balance in the UNFCCC space and decision and why it's integral for achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. She will also share what is needed in order to build true representation and what civil society organizations feminist demands for this year's COP28 are. So, Mishi, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to start this conversation. It's quite an honor. So on behalf of Women in Gender Constituency that I'm representing in my organization, we are really thrilled to be part of this community. It's a little bit at night, so my lighting is not at the best, but I hope you can definitely see me and you can hear me okay. So as you have indicated, I've been asked potentially to respond to 3 questions in terms of the status and what does it matter and what can we do, and some of the key asks, especially towards COP28. So let me start by saying first and foremost that when you talk about gender balance from the feminist perspective, we've been very clear that we are not asking it because it's a good thing to do, or because it's important. And of course, there's a proof that when we engage women, you have more chances of creating more robust decisions. But we want to be very categorical that engagement of women in decision-making, especially in the environment decision-making and any decision-making, is part of the human right. This is fundamentally a right of women to be part of the decision-making. And the others become as advantage of why we are doing that. But fundamentally, we need every human being to exercise their right to making decisions, their right to life, and their right to live a life of dignified world, protected. And that's include them being at the table of decision making. So we have been approaching participation and engagement in the UNFCCC from 1, the right perspective, and 2, from the benefits that comes with the with engagement. And I think to echo what you've said in terms of like, if you don't have women on the table, we are denying ourselves access to their knowledge, to their realities, to their solutions. So we need them on the table from that point of view as well. So just to give you a little bit of the rundown of the journey that we have taken in the UNFCCC when it comes to gender balance conversation. So the first decision ever on gender in the UNFCCC was made in 2001. And this decision was not about mainstreaming gender in the climate action. It wasn't about, the vulnerability of women. It was a decision specifically on the participation of the women. And the decision, one of the language is improving the participation of women in the representation of parties and in the bodies of UNFCCC. That was done in 2001. We are now above 10 years since that decision, I think 11, 12 years after that decision. And within that timelines, the UNFCCC has made almost 120 decisions mentioning gender, and 51 of them categorically reference gender balance in decision making. So suffice to say that we don't have shortage of decision when it comes to emphasis on the importance of participation and gender balance in the university. However, despite those decisions, still gender participation, gender balance is lacking in the UNFCCC bodies. As an organization, we do track participation in the UNFCCC, meeting both in the subsidiary bodies and in the COP, and invite everyone who is in this meeting to, if you don't have access yet, to download our gender climate tracker, where you could see information about your countries and the delegation and participation of women across different countries, but also across different years, and you are able to make that assessment. So, for example, taking to as an example of the COP27, the overall participation of women as of now, it seems, is ranging around 30% in party delegation. our emphasis has been on party delegation because it's them who negotiate and make decisions, and we want them to have gender balance in their delegations. And we also assess the participation and engagement gender balance in the UNFCCC constituted bodies. So as of last year, out of the 17 constituent bodies that we have, almost 10 of them, they have less than 35% of women in the constituted body. So as you can see, we are 11 years since we have decision, we have a number of decisions, but the progress has not been made to the scale that is required. The regional divide is also significant. So part of the work that we do is also to assess which region has more participation, for example, and which region has less, and taking into the consideration, referencing the statistics from COP27, again, consistently, and in other previous year, Africa and Asia have the lowest participation, Africa being the lowest with 30% women in their delegation, in Asia 31%. And while Caribbean and Latin America is sort of like in the middle, Europe having 45%, and the Oceania having the highest, 46%. So if you look at this trend, and we have analyzed this trend over the years for almost 10 years, it seems it takes us to 2042 to attain gender parity. And as feminists, we say we don't have that time, and we don't have that patience, and definitely climate crisis doesn't allow us to drag our feet to 2042 to have gender balance. That's why we need government to act, and to act now to close the gender gap in the participation. And how can we do that? I think just to respond to the next question, one of the systematic way of doing that is really to address the structural issue when it comes to women's rights and women participation. As you can see in the regional divide, the continent that women have weaker rights, for example, they definitely will have less participation. When women have less access to formal education of progression, then chances are they won't be able to acquire the skills and education they need to be employed in the position that they need to be employed for them to be in the government delegations and to come to the UNFCCC. So we need a structural change, and that's why we have constantly pushed for structural change. It's not a question of just adding a woman to a delegation, but transforming the entire system and ensuring women have a stronger right in their countries, in their community, and also creating conducive environment for women's leadership in their communities and in their countries, so that that can reflect in the UNFCCC. That requires a lot of resources that most of the countries are not allocating. So one of the important way, and as feminists, we have constantly pushed for climate, for example, we've pushed for finances that are really support gender action in the climate processes, but also we have pushed for allocation of resources to support women, either women national gender focal point or women who are working in climate action, so that they can be able to have the resources they need to engage in the UNFCCC, but also lead in their communities. Strengthening the capacities, equally an important aspect, especially checking to the considerations, the shackles and the chains that women have. The deliberate attention needs to be made to unleash the power and agencies of the women. Gender Action Plan as a tool has tried to do that significantly, but again, we need to really invest in capacities of women delegates. And last but not least is the question of community and solidarity. For those few women who are in the UNFCCC, for them to be able to effectively engage, they need to hold hand with each other, they need to hold hand with the civil society, but also they need to be shoulder, so that other group of women and other young women can come and join the fights in the UNFCCC. So there is an important work that we are trying to do, and other government officials are trying to do, to build a community of women leaders in the climate action. And in the interest of time, I know I have talked quite a lot in terms of the what are we looking for? What are we looking in COP28? Of course, we are looking to advance women leadership in the COP28. There is a focus this year in the just transition, especially when it comes to gender, and we think that this is also another opportunity for us to advance the narrative around women leadership. But also, as a feminist, we have been keen in advocating for recognition of the role that women play, especially in creating solutions. So we will continue to amplify gender justice solutions in this year COP. We will be working with other and phasing out fossil fuel as much as that is seen as a mainstream issue, but it's at the center of women's issue and feminist issues. And definitely we will continue to advocate for adequate, accessible, new and additional finance specifically that can be accessed by women, especially women in the community and women's rights organization, and also the finance that can be directly channeled to gender action, climate action. And last, this year the GST, this COP is being dubbed as the GST COP. So as feminists, we are working closely in our community to make sure that the GST decision, among other things, send a very strong guidance to governments and parties to ensure that the next round of NDC agenda transformative, and they deliver and support women's leadership in their community, and that has been that to be at the center of the country's NDC, so that women issues are not seen as outside, but rather centered in countries and NDC. And in the line of the GST as well, we will be pushing strongly on gender disaggregated data, because part of the biggest challenge we have faced, or we continue to face, is invisibilization of the women, because you don't have data to support that. So we will continue to call for production and utilization of gender disaggregated data. And for those who know, we do COP Presidency, UN Women and UNFOC will be hosting a gender data conference from 28th to 29th in Dubai as part of the official pre-COP event. So it will be interesting for those who are interested to come and join. So thank you so much, and back to you.
Thank you so much. And I would have so many follow-up questions about the NDC and the Gender Action Plan, of how we can better incorporate that all together, especially at the COP level. But we do need to move on to our next speaker. So I would just remind everyone again, for your questions, you can drop them in the chat, and we'll do our for the end at our Q&A. So our next speaker tonight is Katharina Wiese. So Katie is an ecofeminist who works for the European Environmental Bureau as a policy officer manager for economic transition and gender equality. She's working on economic transition policies, advocating for a feminist economic system centered around care and well-being for the planet and people. Previously, she has been working for different renewable energy developments in West and East Africa as a technical consultant for social impact consulting firm in Berlin, Germany. She has also been investigating gendered impacts of environmental policies in the global South and Europe, publishing scientific articles on that nexus. In her presentation, Katie will explore how we can create a gender transformative agenda within Europe, and what we mean when talking about a feminist and intersectional approach to the just transition, and how we can overcome the European Green Deal's gender blindness. So Katie, over to you.
Thanks a lot. Let me share my screen. So now I just need to get this away. Start the presentation. Yes. Okay, I think you can all see it, right? Yeah. Yeah, thanks also a lot from my side to be here. I'm always happy to be in this round and to discuss this, as I found this a very important topic, which is unfortunately not yet mainstream. That's why it's also so important that we all come together and discuss this. As Bradley already said, I'm Kati. I work for the European Environmental Bureau. Maybe just also 2 words on who we are. We are a network of different environmental organizations, and we are based in Brussels, but we have members all over Europe and also some neighboring countries. And we work on a quite broad range of different topics. So it's really from climate, pollution, health, biodiversity, agriculture, etc. And then we also have the economic transition team where I am in, and which is more about, okay, how can we change the economic system to make it more sustainable from an environmental, but also from a social perspective. So quite a horizontal team as part of the EB. And I wanted to briefly present a bit why we need a feminist European Green Deal and the work that we did on this, and also a report. Okay, so basically where we are, how it started. As some of you maybe know, in 2019, the Commission President von der Leyen, she presented the European Green Deal. And basically back then when she communicated about it, she really kicked off this intense period of developing new laws, frameworks, and strategies to also really, kind of fill this ambitious framework with life. And for us environmentalists, I mean, this was quite an exciting period because we felt finally the environment is being moved from the margins into the center, because before we had the Juncker Commission and environment was really not a priority during that 5 years period. So this was really a really big thing for us. But as feminists, we were also quite surprised to discover that this European Green Deal, so basically the main flagship of this commission, didn't have any reference to gender equality or intersectionality, where at the same time they also presented the gender equality strategy, but also the anti-racism and also the LGBTQI strategy. So for us, the gender sensitivity of the European Green Deal was quite astonishing. And that's why we did 2 publications together with WCF, Women and Environment for a Common Future, one of our member organizations, but also many other organizations who helped us, especially with the first one. And we analyzed different European Green Deal policies and how far they actually integrate an intersectional perspective. And yes, here below you see our approach to it. So what is ecofeminism? And Bradley also already said it before, so it's quite aligned. So we basically come from an intersectional analytical perspective, so meaning that a person can face multiple forms of discrimination or disadvantages, exclusion, or also oppression. Basically, being also explained before, and this is also quite, or there's a lot of studies as well, and when it comes to environment, that the often people with dissecting inequalities are often disproportionately exposed to environmental hazards such as air pollution or extreme weather events, but also actually when we think about other social factors such as access to decent work, adequate housing, and quality education. We try to explicitly address these inequalities and also the power hierarchies. And we call ourselves ecofeminists because, we believe in the interlinkages between climate change and gender equality, meaning that the fight against climate change and gender equality are interlinked, and we cannot do one without the other. And another point is that we also try to basically unravel the root causes of inequalities and inequities that we see, based on gendered inequalities, but also gender-based economic, political, social, and cultural exclusion. So together with 23 organizations, European environmental NGOs, but also research institutes and think tanks, also women rights and racial justice organization. As I said before, we analyze different European policies. So on the left side, you see the big report. And then we also did another 1.5 years later, where we focused on 3 sectors, that being agriculture, energy, and transport, and also going a bit more into depth and into some of the European Green Deal files, but also where we still had a chance to influence those back in the days. And basically what we found is that most of the European Green Deal policies are gender sensitive and also dominated by an androcentric perspective. That means, or that assumes, that the masculine model is the neutral and objective point on which to base policy on. And this can be, for example, found when we think about the just transition mechanism. So this is basically the main tool of the European Union, of the Commission, to facilitate a just and fair transition. And as it's designed now, this actually flows mainly to core regions to support them to transition to green industries. And while this is, of course, important, it risks to most likely benefit men in these coal mining areas, because these are male-dominated sectors, instead of having a deep analysis who else might need special attention in the transition. And here we're also thinking about care jobs or education jobs who are traditionally female-dominated, but which are also vital for the resilience and the well-being of our societies, but really highly under-recognized and undervalued in our economic system right now. And there are some policies within the European Green Deal, and also we'll give some examples that mention gender, but they really fail to propose concrete measures, or they actually tap a bit into binary thinking and don't really address the root causes. And besides all of this, we also post a general critique that the European Commission frames the European Green Deal as the new growth strategy. So it doesn't really break with their traditional approach of green growth, as if the ecological crisis could be solved with new green technologies and green consumption, but without actually the overall reduction of throughput, because there's also actually empirical evidence showing that decoupling economic growth from environmental pressures cannot be achieved at the scale and speed required to achieve Paris agreements. And besides that, the European Green Deal is also quite blind to the dimensions, or like what kind of impacts the European Green Deal has on the majority world. Then I thought maybe I can just give you two examples where gender matters, how it's been reflected in the European Green Deal and what we propose. One is transport. So why does it matter? It matters because mobility systems are not gender neutral. They are dominated by masculine norms. That shows in the fact that studies show that men and women have different mobility patterns. So men are more likely to use individual modes of transport, such as cars, while women are more likely to use public transport or work. In general, research shows that women in general tend to have or to opt more for sustainable transport choices. And linked to this, they also have different mobility patterns, linked to structural inequalities in a patriarchal society that we still live in. So it's nothing new that women are still responsible for the bulk of the care work and worldwide, I would say. And this then also, of course, influences the way they travel. So women tend to have shorter and several trips a day. It's called trip chaining, whereas whereas men have more individual trips commuting from and to the workplace, and potentially also with cars. And here on the slide, you also see a graph. I mean, it's a bit older, but also showing that in Europe there are more men owning a car than women. How is this being reflected in the current European Green Deal policies file that we saw? I mean, despite the fact that the Commission actually commits to equality mainstreaming in all its policies, so there is basically a clear commitment to leave no one behind. When you look in the different policies, it's quite bleak. There's a really big strategy called the Smart and Sustainable Mobility Strategy. There's only one concrete action, and this is to make the transport sector more attractive for women as a working place. So the EC has launched a Women in Transport EU platform, and this is basically a platform where you can share best practices and also connect to different stakeholders. But it really actually fails to be a game changer for various reasons. So first of all, gender is only mentioned in terms of employment, but there are no concrete measures and actions how to actually enhance gender equality in the transport sector. Second, the strategy largely focuses on the promotion of electric cars, buses, and high-speed rail traffic. and more efficient airplanes or air transport in more general. That means it's actually basically focused on greening the infrastructure that we have now, but lacks direction or concrete measures how we can actually shift to a more sustainable modes of transport. So how can we actually shift to more public transport? So it continues to prioritize private and individualized mobility innovation over other transport modes and infrastructure that are more sustainable and that could maybe potentially benefit also a larger part of the population. And the last one is that, also mentioned before, that we really miss concrete measures or recommendations. How can we increase the safety for women and people in vulnerable situations as transport users, but also workers? And there's also no reference to social aspects when we talk about the role of the digitalization in the transport sector. As there, when we think about autonomous car, there are also studies showing that the algorithms actually showing sexist or racist patterns, and this is not being addressed by this strategy. So what we recommend in our report, because these transport systems are neither sustainable actually nor socially just, are that we need really policies and measures and also financing to massively expand the public transport sector with more fair, affordable, accessible and safe mobility services that benefit all. And this includes also women, racialized people, trans and non-binary people, and disabled people. We need also policies or measures that apply sufficiency perspective on mobility. So how can we actually reduce the need for transport and commuting? And a good example are 15-minute cities. I think Paris is a city that implemented it. We need to shift funding from polluting sectors towards clean and public mobility solutions. And finally, really start banning environmental harmful subsidies and public investments, such as tax breaks for aviation fuels. And also, we need to promote policies that make it more attractive and easier to shift from private modes of transport to more sustainable alternatives. And here we can think about low cost or free subscriptions for public transport, or targeted tariffs for different stakeholders, or also improved service provision. So what about a better service as well outside of peak hours, if we know that certain people in society have several trips a day? And another example is also energy. Why does gender matter? So first of all, the energy sector is highly gender segregated. So in the fossil fuel sector, it's even worse. I think it's only 10 or 15% of women, but also in the renewable energy sector, actually only 35% of women are in the renewable energy workforce, and they're often not in decision-making processes. And sorry, Mahat. Now I probably pronounce the name, but Mahana Messi. Also, I already talked a lot about representation, how important it is, and here it's also clearly an underrepresentation when we think about the transport workers, but also the energy ministers, for example, at least in Europe. Another aspect is that energy poverty has a female face. So in Europe, at least, there are more women that suffering from energy poverty, and this is also linked to the structural inequalities that I mentioned before. Because women have to take the bulk of the care work, they also often have less income. This leads into the income gap, gender pay gap, pension gap, etc. Another aspect is that the reproductive work also contributes to different energy consumption patterns. So if one is responsible for the household, it also maybe means that the energy consumption at home is actually higher. Whereas for men, if they use the car, there are different aspects to look at. As I mentioned before, there's a lack of representation of women or the diversity in decision making on energy in Europe, and I think also worldwide. So what when we analyze the European Green Deal, it's also the same thing with transport. So gender is mentioned. For example, there's the Social Climate Fund, which is meant as a fund to compensate when we have higher prices for carbon-intensive energy. And also it was actually thanks to NGOs that it was specifically mentioned in there. But again, there are also no concrete measures or direct funding schemes for women or other groups who are especially vulnerable to energy poverty, and also not to address the root causes why we have it in the first place. And what we then recommend for this part is that we actually need to resubmit gender-aware versions of European Green Deal funding schemes, such as the Renewable Energy Directive or the Renovation Wave, to also integrate criteria to increase the share of women in these sectors that then can also benefit from it, but also include the care sector as one of the beneficiaries. Another one is a revision of the approach how to make consumers key actors of the energy transition. So this is, for example, part of the Renewable Energy Directive, RED II, with more gender-responsive consumer model, ensuring or having measures that women and men can participate in and benefit from decentralized concepts. Because interestingly, there are also studies showing that women are especially open consumer models, for example, being part of an energy community, but because of how the meetings are structured or when they're taking place, women are often excluded, and this has also been seen worldwide. And last but not least, it's also a bit of a problem how the European Union or the Commission defines energy poverty. So what we're demanding is to introduce a common definition that also covers the more multi-dimensional nature and contributing factors, including gender, considering that women are disproportionately impacted by energy poverty. And then last but not least, I just have some conclusions and horizontal recommendations that we have in both of the reports. I mean, in general, because there's a kind of silo approach in the Commission, it's very disappointing that's not been thought together. But that's why I think it's also so important if we think about, okay, European elections are happening next year, and we might have something following the European Green Deal, hopefully, that we really make clear from the start that we need to integrate feminist ideas and concepts, because otherwise we might perpetuate existing inequalities that we see. So more general recommendations of our reports are that, the EC or the institutions should also make efforts to challenge the existing norms that work against gender equality, so also biases or gender stereotypes that might also keep women now to join the transport workforce, for example, or be a prosumer in a decentralized energy system. Another important point are conditionalities. So we should make social and gender equality conditions quite explicit and mandatory for policies. And this also should also apply when we assess and monitor new instruments, especially also funding instruments. I mean, we had the Recovery and Resilience Facility to help European economies to cope with the effects on impacts of COVID. And there was the conditionality that at least a percentage of those investments needs to be green and contribute to the digitalization. And in that vein, we could also have a conditionality that they need to show that it actually contributes to gender equality. There's also still a huge issue with data. So to inform policies, we need data, and there should be efforts to collect gender disaggregated data, but also with an intersectional perspective and not just binary. Introduce systemic gender budgeting. So if we, and also in line with the conditionalities. So if we do budgets, and also if we do green budgets for transition, governments should show how this contributes to gender equality. Then ensure gender balanced representation in negotiation, decision making. And the last ones are a bit more measures to address economic inequalities that lead to the pay and pension gap. Also measures how can we actually diversify the workforce to allow women to participate, but also to make those work or have better conditions for their work, and this also applies for renewable energy. Just because it's this work is maybe greener, I mean, there are also many problems with work or with the conditionalities of work. And then also really, break some of the patriarchal structures and also promote the redistribution of unpaid care work in society more evenly, placing care also more prominently into the economy and also heavily invest in it. And I think I already talked a lot, so this is my last slide, just to share.
Very fast, please.
Also, okay, I can also maybe stop here. And maybe
Okay, I'm so sorry,
it.
but please, thank you so much, Katie. Please put your questions in the chat, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for all of our speakers and to have Q&A as well.
I'm so sorry.
All good, all good. Super interesting. I didn't want to stop you. So our third speaker unfortunately cannot be here with us today, but she's provided us with a video recording of her statement about applying the lived experiences to climate finance and using a people-centered and humanized approach. She says that, and I quote, "Together, education, capacity building, and solidarity are fundamentally feminist principles to center people in decision-making and in their right to self-determination." So Aliyah Kaji is a climate reality leader from South Africa and was trained online in 2020. She's a public finance campaigner in South Africa with the climate justice organization 350africa.org, who is also part of the Fair Finance Coalition of Southern Africa. As a campaigner, Aliyah works on amplifying the call for public funds for climate justice using her background in corporate development and civil society sectors. Funds must be sufficient, transparent, and accountable, and part of this work ensures enabling a public understanding of finance flows and processes. Through building solidarity between developing countries facing climate finance, enabling capacity building for all, and strengthening advocacy and agency, Aliyah is a feminist organizer. So I'm going to play the video that she sent us. And I ask you to bear with me as I hope that the sound and screen share. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, all right, I will click play. Apologies, this was working earlier.
Yeah, maybe I can check if I can share my screen and play the video as I have it downloaded, if that's fine.
Yes, that's fine. I'm sorry it was working.
No worries.
I guess we have some issues with the sound.
Gosha, did you click on the optimize sound button before sharing?
Yes, I think that the recording is quite, the voice is quite low. Let me see. And let me know if you can.
I felt a bit removed from local organizing work on
Now it works.
it really demands representation from local perspectives and from the grassroots. So I did the training to ground myself in campaigning and mobilizing on climate change from a scientific perspective, even after doing a science degree and development studies degree, but bringing these together in a progressive way towards action and towards demanding climate justice. And so, alongside some internal reflections and a personal theory of change, I now work in the civil society sector full-time, and that's where some of my learnings on a feminist vision for climate finance and climate justice has really been based. So my role now is the public finance campaigner for 350africa.org, a climate justice organization modeled on supporting people-led movements to demand climate justice. And I look at the role of public finance in climate justice. And this is also done through numerous networks and coalitions, so namely the Fair Finance Coalition of Southern Africa, where we focus on development finance institutions in the region and their commitments to climate change, transparency, and accountability. We are part of an international network of organizations working towards fair finance through finance institutions. And ultimately, this looks at the impact of public finance on important matters like climate change. I'd been exposed to the world of finance in a few different ways. So through the corporate sector and a role in sustainability consulting, but through climate finance in the development sector and working on projects on a national scale. So working in the climate justice space and advocating for the role of inclusivity in decision-making, in transparency, in accountability, it's clear that climate action will need substantial resources to happen. The problem with this is that the manner in which financing flows can either worsen the status quo, exacerbating inequality, poverty, unemployment in the case of Southern Africa, or improve the status quo. Finance can really depend, the impact of finance can really depend on how it's designed, the cost of finance, and the terms and conditions of financing, and how it impacts our national economies. It's really hard to push for mainstream political and decision-making processes to be more transparent and publicly accountable, especially where finances are involved at a multinational level, multilateral level. A lot of this has to do with how intimidating finance can be and left up to expert finance or expert economic professionals, despite economics being the allocation of resources for public goods and public services. The flows of money and the impact of money and resources have a very important role to ensure we meet our goals of climate justice, but very difficult to hold accountable to a democratic cause. Part of what we learned when entering into the space of climate finance as a collective, as a coalition, was that no matter how much we advocate for more transparency and more accountability in the public sphere and through public institutions and climate finance, we desperately see that in order to address these issues and make these calls, it's very difficult to strengthen this call without widespread public understanding of the finance world, finance terms, finance terminology. People are often not informed or helped to understand these issues, and so they don't feel confident enough to advocate for meaningful inclusion or accountable public finances. We are told we need to leave it up to the professionals, and we don't often understand the way budgets work or national economies. And so our work began. It's not a matter of becoming experts ourselves, but rather how to collectively build our own skill set on knowing the basics of finance to know well enough how to strategically make our demands for holistic climate justice. If we were learning as a collective coalition already in the sector, why not invite others to learn along with us? And so our popular education approach to climate finance, especially for the just transition, began. While we're not particularly labeled as feminists or adopt an outwardly feminist approach, I believe that the ways in which we mobilize and organize is fundamentally feminist. I hope to share some of this with you today through some of the ways in which we work and some of the principles that help us organize, even if we do it more by default or by naturally. And so feminist organizing on financing for climate justice really begins with a collective and inclusive commitment. And this starts with a common understanding of the issues, co-creating not only our understanding, but also our demands, and building a consensus around these through tools like participatory workshops. And this is underpinned by creating a safe space to share and learn from diverse representatives. Our work is grounded in lived experience, and storytelling is a main methodology, and this really builds a sense of empathy but trust in our work. Our work is fundamentally driven by capacity building and political education for us to learn together, and in our own work, remaining transparent and accountable through regular feedback loops. Our work must remain fluid. Our documents and our learnings are living tools to really mobilize and use with your own constituencies and have a common sense of ownership. Our work is action oriented, so a lot of our events have campaigning and action events to them, and these are ultimately rooted in lived experiences to address living challenges. Our work is really trying to reclaim economics, to humanize finance, and challenge the mainstream narratives and power structure where we have no say in our economics and our finances that we need to find justice. In these processes, we ultimately build trust and solidarity, and we work collaboratively and collectively in advocating with all of these towards a set of principles for fair finance. Now we have begun working together with other countries that are recipients of public finance to affirm our positions in the global south and what we demand of finance, all in collaborative and collective ways. So right now, I'm actually on my way to Senegal, and why I couldn't join the webinar, but we hope to be sharing our experiences of advocacy and our work on climate finance, as Senegal is the latest country to receive just transition financing through the Just Energy Transition Partnership. And so what our work does politically is try to challenge the top-down nature of financing decisions, especially in the urgent context of the climate crisis. And this has disproportionate effects across lines of race, gender, and class, and using these voices and these perspectives to state our demands and our position and use this to hold institutions accountable. So where are the marginalized voices in directing finance to where it is needed the most? We present our own position from our constituencies on what we call for from finance. And the process itself in developing these principles has been really affirming and weighted in solidarity. We hope that the means actually become strengthened by the processes. The ends become processes by the means. So where can you see all of this? It's on our website, Fair Finance Southern Africa, and you'll find examples under the JETP and the Fair Finance School, and especially our Climate Activist Guide on Climate Finance. I believe this webinar is really directed at a largely European audience, and so one of my takeaway messages is to ensure that your processes, your projects, and importantly your perspectives are geared towards the global south, or even nationally or internally towards those that are more marginalized when it comes to deciding what needs to be done to achieve a just transition, but more holistically than that, to really extend this perspective through financing tools, financing mechanisms, to project implementation, to project oversight and monitoring and evaluation. It's really important to remember that the just transition is really rooted in organized labor and the demands from labor, but importantly protecting the local and surrounding communities in coal areas. So we need to make room for inclusive decision-making and ownership of these processes to put people in the center, to make human rights a fundamental organizing tool and focus area to hold finance accountable, and do so in a feminist way that brings people along with us in the process of reaching a just transition. So thank you very much, and I hope to engage with you all in one way or another, but please feel free to check out our material and contact me anytime. Thank you.
So we just had a great talk from Aaliyah, and without further ado, to keep time into consideration, I'd like to introduce our last, but definitely not least speaker, Monica Bachkowska. So, Monica is a climate reality leader from Poland and a global advocate for equitable climate action. She is a bridge builder creating powerful synergies between climate science, feminine empowerment, and transformational leadership for systemic change. As an EU Climate Pact ambassador and the founder of the Women for Climate Interdevelopment Goals Hub, she passionately fuels her mission. Monica creates spaces that connect women changemakers and system change practitioners both from the global south and the global north to develop as leaders of inclusive climate action and co-creates projects for the flourishing of people on the planet. She is dedicated to helping women develop a regenerative mindset from the inside out, fostering transformative change that weaves well-being with inner growth for global impact. So, Monica, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for a Q&A.
Thanks so much, Bradley. Thank you for inviting me, and I'd be so humbled to be able to share my story today next to Katie, Alia, and Muahana Hamisi. I think I pronounced it well. So just let me know if you can see the first slide, if everything is fine, and then I will start. Yeah, alrighty. I will also start my my timer, so we'll make sure it will finish on time. Yeah, all right. Okay, so hello everyone. Yes, my name is Monika. I'm a climate scientist, feminine empowerment coach, and facilitator of transformational spaces for inclusive climate action. And one of my biggest passions is co-prototyping collective initiatives and catalyzing women's communities for greater impact, which often involves prototyping ourselves as transformational leaders. And this is why I founded a Paris Women for Climate Hub, which over time evolved into the Global Women for Climate Hub as a part of Inner Development Goals initiative. It's an endeavor that supports people to build transformative skills for sustainable development. So in this presentation, I will share some perspectives on what it takes to enable inclusive climate action. And I will try to delve a little bit into my journey of transformational leadership, where I started, where it took me, and the lessons I've learned. And I hope to inspire us to collectively explore what it truly means and what it takes to be a feminine transformational leader. So yeah, let's discuss the available solutions and identify the support needed to make this happen. Because I firmly believe that every woman in this world has an important role to play and a message to share to meet the urgency of our times, the climate and the equity crisis. And to illustrate this, I love to share this picture that we see here. It's a picture by Calvi Bird from the MIT Transformational Lab that depicts transformational leadership as a unique journey. And for me, it invites us to see and own our context as a unique part that contributes to collective transformation. And at the same time, each path of transformational leadership has some common phases. It often begins when we connect to our inner compass, our values, when we listen to what life calls us to do. And very often it's centered around these two big questions. Who am I? Who am I and what's mine to do? And that's also my big question forever, probably. So for me, it started like this. Life gives us countless inspirations, even at an early age. Born in '85 in communist Poland, being 4 years old, I found my mission and message saving the kittens. And although from the perspective of time, I'm not really sure if I was really saving them and if they actually needed this. And I feel that this reflection is still quite relevant in many contexts. So I wonder what you think about this. Anyways, as a follow-up story, right, when we discover our activist heart beating loudly yet aching to express itself through the lenses of our cultural experiences, we jump into our realities, right? And there are many realities. So sometimes we jump with soft landing and sometimes without. So in my life, I had opportunities to learn, to grow, to travel, earn my PhD, work in academia, NGO. I've been connected to humanitarian agency. It brought me some satisfaction, but it also brought me burnout and the frustration that I'm not making much positive difference. So I wonder if you can relate sometimes to this, what I'm sharing, right? So here I want to amplify this gap. On one side, so many women right now are feeling called to express their gifts in ways that will make a difference, right? We are feeling this impulse of empathy and creativity to meet the urgency of our times, right? Climate and equity crisis. On the other hand, there are all of these experiences, feeling unsupported, overwhelmed, depleted, not feeling confident to speak and act, or feeling like I don't know enough. Very often women are just sharing with me, I don't know where to start. My experience, for example, was like I was informing the world about all the terrible things that will happen to us, especially if we won't act now, and mostly leaving people terrified or perplexed. So in the end, I felt quite powerless. So can you relate to this, right? Like I'm sure that some of you can relate to this story. So I'm sharing all of this because, so this slide, first of all, this slide shows a word cloud, sort of a word cloud that represents experiences and challenges of many women from the global north, for example, mostly North America and Europe that I met and worked over the last decade, who were contributing or wanting to contribute to climate action, environmental or social justice initiatives. And what I've been hearing over and over again is that they're sharing that they are not having spaces where they could feel emotionally safe to start even exploring what their role or unique message is. So to start developing their contexts and inner capacities to lead and make an impact. And I'm still talking just about the global north when we are talking about emotionally safe spaces. And I haven't even started about the global south, where we are starting to discuss the physical safety issues, right? So what I wanted to say, so I want to co-presence with you this apparent gap, right, from a place of empathy, because it can be a tender moment for all of us to face all of these challenges, right? And one of my mentors often says, if caught in time, a breakdown can become a breakthrough, right? So let's not lose hope, right? But therefore, it is so important to have spaces for solution-oriented generative dialogue, right? So there is this big question for us, how not to lose this collective opportunity, right? Women as opportunity, and create enabling environments for women to rise as leaders of climate action. And I'm inviting you first to think about your own personal context, just for a moment, and your own needs. And so we can, after that, expand to the world at large too, right? Yeah, so there is this big question. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Yes. So how can we create spaces for ourselves and other women to shift the experiences of isolation, victimhood, powerlessness into co-creation, right? Co-creating possibilities. And it's a big question, right? It's a big question. And we, as the Global Women for Climate Hub, we are community of system change practitioners and lifelong learners. We are trying to find these answers, the answers to this question by stepping into a solutioning process, right? Assuming that we know enough to start building the solutions and prototyping the solutions. So we are prototyping processes and events to enable women to positively influence societal change while sustaining their well-being and a sense of purpose. And here I would like to just offer a little bit of inspiration and some some of the prototypes. So these prototypes include, for example, community regeneration events supporting women in shifting from this self-extraction mindset into a self-sustaining operating mindset from the inside out, while crowdfunding women from the global south on their journey to COP, right? So thinking how we can have everyone in the circle of care, right? Another prototype can be co-learning journeys using awareness-based methods for systems change to discover how can we leverage our talents and experiences and expertise for greater impact. Or, for example, prototyping practice spaces to shift from isolation and lack of confidence into capacity building and partnerships. And speaking of partnerships, for example, we are developing partnerships with She Changes Climate, where many of us serve as mentors of climate action in their mentorship program. Another incredible initiative that I just admire and still seek how to support. Therefore, I'm presenting it for you. It's New Women Connectors and their climate justice roundtables, which aim to enable refugees and migrants in building community resilience. So I consider it an incredible and beautiful way of prototyping community solutions. And in the end, my time is probably up. So in our ongoing commitments to fostering positive change, we are exploring how to use the inner development goals framework of transformational leadership skills that you see here on the left to create enabling conditions for social coherence and the just transition, now also step by step, also focusing on Eastern Europe. And if you're interested in learning more, in connecting and co-prototyping with us, learning with us, join our next online event, December 7th, in the midst of COP. So we are calling it COP Presencing Session and Being the Voice of the Earth. So you can find your answer to what's mine to do and have your voice heard and take inspired action that creates a ripple effect in your unique context of influence. So yeah, I think this is it, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica. This always amazing to hear you speak. So next we have about 15 minutes for a Q&A, which will be handled or coordinated by my colleague and climate reality leader, Paula Villasencio. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm struggling with names tonight. But Paula's fantastic, and she's going to be taking us through the Q&A. So if you have more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if they come up to you in your head. I will also be sharing some resources while Paula is monitoring the chat.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, everyone. Well, thank you, Mishi, Kathy, Monica, for the excellent presentations. It is quite insightful and interesting and motivational discussions that you bring to this session. I have actually three questions we can ask. We can start with Mishi, maybe. Mishi, on the WIDO website, it says one potential pathway for climate justice is advancing the principle of feminist foreign policy. Maybe you could elaborate more on this?
Hey, sorry, I thought you are reading more questions. So definitely, WIDO is one of the championing or co-founder of the Feminist Foreign Policy Collective. As you will know now, there are a number of organizations that has committed to have feminist foreign policies. And they just have I think the annual gathering in Netherlands like a few weeks ago. And out of those feminist foreign policy, for example, initiative like Green Global New Deals and other born, And we do strongly believe that as feminist organization, we need to hold governments to account, and feminist ideals need to be mainstreamed, not only in civil society, but also extended to how government operate. We do use understandably, for example, that most of the government who claim to have feminist policies, they're not 100% feminists. So we are using their claiming of being feminist as an opportunity for us to hold them to account and put them in the high standards on delivering, especially on their climate finance, on their climate commitment, but also on the broader foreign policies as well. So we have different buckets of work, and we do believe that all the buckets of work that we choose to engage in sort of like connect, either complement or become as a hook through which we can engage in other conversation that mutually support the core mission of we do, which is to advance the climate justice and environment justice, and making sure that we hand over to the next generation the world which is safer for the people and the planet.
Great, thank you very much, Mishi. Kate, we have another one for you from Elena. You were discussing about gender matters, no, for transport and energy. Precisely, Elena asked, which were the sexist and racist patterns recognized in autonomous cars? Is this issue often recognized in discussion around gender and mobility, she asked?
Yes, thanks a lot for the question. So basically, there are studies showing that when they test autonomous cars, and for example, they need to decide when there's an accident or when someone's passing, if the car stops or not, that the algorithm deciding on this is fed with mostly, I would say, masculine, white, middle class stereotypes. That means if there's maybe a person of color or a woman then walking the streets, that the car might not recognize this as a person to stop. And this is actually also not a new issue. It's also been been a reoccurring issue, I think, in AI, and also this technology, the face scanning technology. And it's not, it's not a big topic in the EU, unfortunately. I think there are many great organizations that try to raise it, but I think the lack of any mentioning of this in the smart and sustainable mobility strategy sadly shows how less discussion or attention on this is on this topic, unfortunately.
Yeah, thanks. There's still much more work to do on that and many other issues as you mentioned. Okay, for the three of us, and precisely related to what Monica explained us, no? How we, considering that we need to support these gender responsive climate actions and that we have issues related to capacity building, participation, finance mainly, etc. How we can create real synergies between social and environmental movements and not fight our fights in silos, I would say. How do you think we can address this connection or this collective, how we can think these solutions collectively?
Should I start?
Yes, please, Monica.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing this, right? And also, I'm pretty sure Katie can also share something about this, right? So often, Katie was referring to this issue of a root cause and the problem with the dialogue between the whole society. So how we are addressing this this problem is that we are very often following the part of a big part of transformational journey is really is about helping us to learn about and co-sense together the system that we belong to and how the system really impacts our outer and inner states. So very often women who are talking about issues in climate finance, very often, I think as Alia mentioned, are talking about, I don't know enough. And this is very often disempowering us to take any other step. So I think this is one or the second, the most common pattern for women to take action, our inner stories of knowing that we are not enough. And very often we are very afraid of that. We are very often afraid to really speak about this and ask for help. Because the society is not always the most safe place to really to talk about that we don't know about something enough. So that's how we are really our solution is really to create emotionally safe spaces for women to start learning what we know already and how we can start prototyping solutions from that place. And usually it really starts with our connection to our own self-worth and motivation and partnering with others to learn more and partner with others to ask for resources. So this is why the Global Women for Climate Hub is bringing so many women from different institutions, from different backgrounds, because we are realizing that actually we are addressing the questions that are global, and we have to really start having conversations and sharing resources to address the root cause of the whole iceberg problem that speaks into systems that we are belonging to. So capacity building about learning how to speak, how to learn, and how to share resources from this spirit of collaboration. Very often, it's not only about women. We humans are in this mindset of competition and scarcity. So, for example, we are offering lots of workshops how to help women from the inside out develop this mindset of knowing that we are all enough and we are all unique, and from this place of self-worth we can start co-creating and collaborating. So there's this big issue of shifting from competition into collaboration and belief, and acting from this place of believing that together, not alone, never alone, it will never work alone, but together we have enough resources to address the big problem. So for us, it's an outer work that starts also very much from this inner work. When we are together, we have enough resources to start addressing the problem. So yeah, I hope I offer some inspiration.
Wonderful, Monica. Thank you. Mishi, Kathy, something you would like to add?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I think I've shared a blog that I authored on ingredients in building sort of like a community and movement around climate justice, especially from the women perspective. I mean, from feminist perspective. And I've shared three ingredients. So one of them is embracing diversity and looking at diversity as a gift, not a challenge to overcome. And I think often than not, we are so obsessed that we want to be one. We want all of us to be in one space. We want all of us to be under one umbrella organization, for example, or coalition. And I think that is disservice to the movement because there's a beauty on us being in our collective, in our identities, in different identities. So, for example, if we're I'm coming from a global south and I find it home to be in a community with organization from the global south. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're passionate about this specific issue, there's nothing wrong with that. So for academician, for example, in being in academician organization, collective, so as thematic area, it's just that we need to embrace our diversity, knowing that we are different, knowing that we are pursuing, we have different reality, and how our differences become an opportunity and a gift, so that we are able to leverage different capacities, different realities. We are able to, to put those different ingredients to create a beautiful salad that can service the movement. And I think is also recognizing at what point we need to support which organization or which collective. So we organize or we coordinate women and gender constituencies, and we open that space for folks to come and engage. But that space serves as a tool through which you can collectively engage within the formal process of UNFCCC. We do understand there's a limitation of the work that we do because we have created it as a space, as a vehicle towards collective work in the negotiation, but there's a lot of work that need to be done in the communities, in the countries, and that mechanism cannot serve that. So we need, for example, members from the WGC need to support other movements that serve that purpose. So I think that is really core. And two other points that I need to emphasize is what I call dignified participation. We often want to have people attending or be part of a collective, for example, without really taking into the consideration on how they show up and how dignified that is. So, for example, we will claim that we are global space, we are inviting everyone, but we just use one language. How dignified that is. Or we are saying we are global, we are bringing people, we are supporting to bring them to the COP. But the moment we gave them ticket and book accommodation and given per diem, and that's our job, and they have to navigate, like being in a foreign country, and most of them, for example, coming from, it's the first time traveling, so navigating how to get from the airport to their hotels, navigating the intricacies of the COP. So how do we really center dignity in participation and us being together? I think to me that's a sort of like core element on how we can build a collective feminist. And I really want to encourage colleagues that to take pride on how different we are. It should be the aim that all women network and movement will become one and one thing only, because that will defeat the purpose of us being a brilliant community of diverse feminists across different color, regions, and interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mishi. Kathy, you wanted to say something?
Maybe I can just react to another question on green growth.
Okay. Please, did you read the question?
Yes, I read it already. So Nicole asked that I brought up the fact that there's actually no scientific evidence that green growth is happening at the pace and scale required to reach Paris agreements. So we've been advocating for an economic transition change beyond growth since a while, and I think it's slowly also coming in the climate space. I see it with our network, that more and more people are interested in beyond growth or different economic alternative systems, and it also really changed within the last 5 years. And I also observed that many other organizations or movement critique the extractive and unsustainable and unsocial capitalist system that we are living in. So I do feel that there's a general acknowledgement that for effective climate change, we also need to change the economic system, because in the end, the overproduction, overconsumption, especially in Europe, is also a large driver of environmental destruction and social inequality elsewhere. But then I think there are also still a lot of organizations that still have to figure out for them how they want to frame this. So I know that Climate Action Network is a large network of different organizations working on climate. They have nothing, I think, public yet, but they have internal discussions how does Beyond Growth fit in their strategies, for example. I know that Oxfam has some internal discussions. So yeah, I'm hopeful that this will also be a bigger topic in the upcoming years. And for feminist spaces, I do think there's also some activists or also researchers who really engage on the questions, okay, how can we really center and care in the economy, considering the fact that care at the moment, but also ecological processes, are undervalued and not recognized in our economic system. So I always feel like there's this division of the productive sphere of the economy, where all the market and goods and services are that have a price tag, and then we have the maintenance economy, which are ecological care processes that are not paid or undervalued, but are actually very vital to even maintaining the productive sphere of our economic system. So there's also a growing range of different scholars who actually also explore this a bit more.
Thank you very much. And as we are here and also looking at what is going on the other parts, as Mishi also mentioned, thinking on what is going on in the global south, global north. I mean, there are great ideas also developing, on the global south too. So I guess we don't have more time. Thank you for your, as said, inspirational presentations and answers. And Bradley, please, we can close the event.
Yes, so I have a few closing words from our organizers, and it is, and I'll read it out loud. So, a feminist vision for a healthy, just, and sustainable future means taking a holistic approach instead of solving crises in policy silos. We need to look at the energy transition as an opportunity to dismantle existing inequalities. We also need to acknowledge that women are not a homogeneous group and constantly use an intersectional lens. We need to integrate gender and climate. Sorry? We need to integrate gender and climate mainstreaming into all policy sectors and at all levels of policy making, creating synergies between the two. With that, we've shared some calls to action in the chat, and you can find all the links there. So please do be sure to click on them before you leave this evening. And before we leave, a final huge thank you and round of applause to our speakers, Mishi, Katie, Leah, Monica, to the Climate Reality Project Europe for making this event possible, in particular Jessica and Gosha, as well as Paula. This webinar will be shared in a blog post soon, and we look forward to working together for a more just and equitable world. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night. I can't wait to see what everyone does in the future, and I will be trying to follow all the good work everyone's doing. Take care.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.